Alright, well, welcome to this review of the 2016 AP Microeconomics free response questions. These are the ones that we're going to be, our sample ones that we could have for our upcoming test, or if you're reviewing for the AP Microeconomics exam, you might find this useful at that point too. So, I handed these out in class. If you need to find these, you can find them on the AP College Board's website. Then you can print it off and have one to follow along. Anyway, let's dive right in. Question number one, we're going to go through this one. The market for bananas, muffins, and coffee are interrelated. Each market is perfectly competitive. So in the market for bananas, the equilibrium price is $1 per pound, and the quantity is 1,000 pounds per week. I'm going to quickly draw that graph here. If there's the demand and supply, I know this is really sloppy, but it helps me think through this problem. So demand, quantity, price, equilibrium price was $1 a pound, and that equilibrium quantity was 1,000. Suppose the government imposes a price floor on bananas at $1.20 a pound. Well, that's a price above the equilibrium price, so it will be an effective price floor. Causing the quantity supplied to increase to 1,500 pounds. So the quantity supplied there at that price, sorry for the sloppiness there, let me try fix that. The quantity supplied at that price is 1,500. I'm not going to write that in there. So we went up 1,500. Of course, the quantity demanded there is going to be less than 1,000. So would the price floor result in a shortage, a surplus, or neither? Well, the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded, so we will have a surplus. So let's scroll down. Problem 1, A, Part 1, surplus. Y, again, I'm just going to shorthand this, but Y, quantity supplied will be greater than the quantity demanded. Alright, you could also say that it's an effective price floor because it's above the equilibrium price. Part 2. Part 2 says, calculate the price elasticity of supply if the price increases from $1 to $1.20 and show my work. Alright, well, elasticity always equals the percent change in quantity over a percent change in price. So I'll first figure out my percent change in quantity. Now, the AP board will allow you to use the initial quantity formula for calculating the percent change. I think the midpoint method is more accurate, and AP, of course, will accept that as well. So that's the method I'm going to use here, is the midpoint method, although the numbers actually in this case set up better for using the initial quality as your base for calculating percent change. But here we go. Percent change in quantity is going to equal my new quantity supplied, 1,500, minus my initial quantity supplied, 1,000, over the midpoint. And again, this is where the numbers would actually come back better if I used the initial number, but I'm going to use the midpoint, halfway between those two. And for my tests, I do hope you use the midpoint. And I should say times 100. And if I do that, I'm going to get 500 over 1250, or 40%. Next thing I got to do is my percent change in price. We went from $1 to $1.20, so I've got 1.2 minus 1. The midpoint of those is 1.1 times the 100. And what I'll get is, let's see, 0.2 over 1.1 to 11. So that's really, there we go, 18.1818 percent. So the 8.18 repeats. If I take then 40 divided by 18, I get my elasticity equals 2.2. There's my final answer. Then we need to do part 3. Part 3 says between $1 and $1.20 is the supply elastic, unit elastic, or inelastic? And we've got an E of greater than 1. That would imply that the supply is elastic. Why is that? The quantity changing is greater than the price change. Elastic. Y percent change in quantity is greater than the percent change in price. We had a big change in the quantity for a small change in the price. That's our definition of elastic. Alright, part 2 of that problem, or part B I should say. Bananas are input for muffins. That means if I want to make muffins, I need some bananas. They're part of my input cost. So let's see. The first thing I have to do is draw a correctly labeled graph for the market of muffins indicating equilibrium price and quantity P0 and Q0. Alright. B1. Here's my graph. Price, quantities, demand, supply, P0, Q0. Alright, there's part A. Second thing it says, on the graph drawn in part B1, show the impact of an increase in the price of bananas on the muffin market, labeling the new equilibrium price and quantity P1 and Q1. Okay? Well, if they are an input cost, I mean bananas, you need to buy bananas in order to make muffins, we're going to have a decrease in the supply of muffins. Costs went up. I'm going to label that supply 0, supply 1. It's always good to put a little arrow in showing direction of movement. Most importantly though, we have to label P1 and Q1. And then let's see, part 3, on the same graph, completely shade the area that represents the change in consumer surplus caused by the increase in the price of bananas. Okay. Before the change in the price of bananas, I'm just going to draw this in, and then I'll kind of get rid of it, but before the change in price, this whole area was the consumer surplus. Now, the consumer surplus is just this area here. So it's a little bit smaller. And so the difference is between these two prices, and let me shade in the area that it changed. There we go. We lost some consumer surplus with that increased price. So that was actually B1, B2, and B3. That means we got one more part of the problem to do, and that would be part C. Part C says, in the market for coffee, the equilibrium price is $3 per cup, and the equilibrium quantity is 100 cups per week. the cross price elasticity of coffee with respect to muffins is -2. So are coffee and muffins normal goods, inferior goods, complementary goods, or substitute goods? Well, if it's a cross price elasticity of -2, just the way I would think that through, always go back to percent change in quantity over percent change in price. So we're looking at the market for coffee. And we have a negative number, which means basically as the price of muffins goes up, because that's our, there we go, I was doing an autosave there again. As the price of muffins goes up, the quantity of coffee goes down. Well, that generally is true for things that are complements to each other. So you buy your muffin with your coffee, and if muffins are more expensive, maybe buy a little less coffee. But any goods that are complements, think of peanut butter and jelly. If the price of peanut butter goes up, people buy less jelly. So anyway, any one of those things is true. So part 1 actually only says we have to state the answer, so they are complementary goods. We don't really know if they are normal goods or inferior goods because we don't know their income elasticity, so we could have immediately crossed those two out. Anyway, part 2. Assume the supply of coffee is perfectly elastic. Using the equilibrium price and quantity given above, draw a correctly labeled graph for the coffee market and show the impact of an increase in the price of muffins on the coffee market. Alright, so let's go draw our market for coffee. As we draw these things, we always draw P and Q. We've got a regular demand curve. We'll call it D0. And we've got a perfectly elastic supply curve, so I have to draw it as a horizontal line. And then, I forgot what happened here. Show the impact of an increase in the price of muffins. Well, if we have an increase in the price of muffins, people buy less coffee. That's actually a shift in demand for coffee. So that would be our new demand curve. And again, it's a good idea to put a little arrow to show the directions. The last thing I think we needed to do was put in the price and quantity, because they actually gave us the equilibrium price and quantity in the question up there. At $3 per cup, the quantity is 100 cups. So price was $3 and the quantity was 100. And did it say how much it shifted? 100 cups across. Assume the equilibrium price. Draw correctly label. Show the impact. Okay, it doesn't say the amount of quantity. So now, part 3. Given the original quantity of 100 cups of coffee per week, if the increase in the price of muffins is 10%, calculate the new equilibrium quantity in the coffee market. So we knew the cross price elasticity was -2. In fact, I'm going to do my work right here. We knew that this was -2, and the percent change in price was 10%. So what is going to be the percent change in quantity? That's what we got to find out. So just a little arithmetic there. X equals -2 times 10% equals -20%. Okay, so if we started with 100 cups per week times -20%, there we go, we would see that we would lose 20 cups of coffee per week. So we started with 100, we lost 20, we now have 80 cups per week. Again, I would probably show that work down here, that -2 equals 10% change in price for our x equals -20%. The 100 times -20% equals -20. 100 minus 20 equals 80. That's our new quantity. In fact, I could draw that on my graph right here and say that that new quantity is 80. My graph is very much not to scale, but it'll work. So anyway, there is problem 1. I'll do the second problem from AP Microeconomics in a moment here on a separate video, and then I will do a third problem from the 2014 Microeconomics test. So come back and watch those.